Welcome back. We know you have health questions, and our doctor on call has the answers. We welcome back UK emergency physician Dr. Ryan Stanton to answer some of the questions. We are multimedia. We're getting questions from Facebook, our website. You've got podcasts to talk about, all kinds of ways to get you important medical information. So we appreciate you asking your questions. And today we'll start with one from Kimberly in Mount Sterling about back pain. She says if you pull a muscle in your lower back on one side, and she says she had that happen, and a month after that it started up again. She took muscle relaxers and it stopped hurting, but was that a good idea? So trying to understand back pain and its treatment.
Well, there's a couple of topics, things we talk about here, one being the actual injury. So what happens when you pull a muscle? Back pain is very common at some point during our life. Almost 100% of folks will have back pain at some point or the other, and it's actually one of the most common sources of chronic pain that people experience. And what happens is you actually take those muscles and you have little injuries to them. A full tear is you completely tear the muscle, but most injuries like these you see here have some form of muscle injury. Your body goes in, attacks that, tries to fix it as best it can. A lot of scar tissue is formed, so yes, even after years, you can still have pain, you can have aggravation of those sites. And so it's very common as we get older. Most people will have some sort of point in their body where they have pain that will kind of recur.
And you hear that a lot with car accidents in particular,
yes.
That sometimes there's a very delayed response if you've been involved in an accident, that your back may start hurting afterwards.
Well, with car accidents, the next day is the worst for most people. We have a lot of people bounce back with pain the next day, not knowing how bad it's going to hurt once those muscles tighten up. But yeah, the same idea, pulled muscles, strained muscles, ligaments getting pulled away from the bones. That scarring and repair process leads to later pain and discomfort.
And as far as treatment goes, of course, there are medications. What's the recommendation there?
The medications, what we recommend for all types of strains and injuries is the RICE therapy, not literal rice, but RICE therapy, rest, ice, compression, and elevation. That's elevating it when you have it at home and you can rest as best you can. Back's a little bit different. Compressing that more for extremity injuries such as ankles and wrists. Icing it. Icing's very important for inflammation. Inflammation causes a lot of the pain. And then resting it. The more you're on it, the more it's going to swell, the more pain it's going to cause. In terms of medications, we recommend Tylenol, acetaminophen, ibuprofen, or Motrin, any type of anti-inflammatory. I don't really recommend that you restart any type of prescription medications. You need to check with your doctor before you go in and start prescription medications. It may have gone bad. It may interact with other medications you're on, and it may not be the right cure.
Too important to check on that. Here's another question. This is actually a follow-up from Janice. Last time Dr. Stanton was with us, we talked about organic fruits and vegetables and the Dirty Dozen, some of the ones that you really need to look out for. And she wants to know about meats and dairy, and if you'll continue the conversation on which of those should be organic.
Well, I assume her husband's still getting regular eggs in the organic egg carton. But this is something I wanted to talk about. Unfortunately, you guys just don't let me talk into the 1 o'clock show. And so meats and poultry and milk products are very important to think about too. The two main things with those are the antibiotics and steroids. Antibiotics are used to help the growth of the animals, but once they get into humans, actually produce resistant type infections. In fact, the CDC found that in 1999, they feel like 10,000 people were sickened by a resistant form of salmonella from some meat products just because of the antibiotics that made a resistant form of the bacteria. So it's very common. It's something we worry about in healthcare because we want to be able to fight these illnesses and make people better. And so removing those from the equation. And then hormones. We know that hormones, which are used in the animals to make them bigger and stronger, faster. Why have chicken tomorrow when you can have it today? That actually trickles down. It doesn't take much in terms of these signals to affect us as humans. And we're now seeing puberty in young girls at ages 4 and 5, which is way too early, and we have some big concerns about that. So what we recommend, especially if you have young children, go organic. Women, especially those childbearing age, need to go organic if possible. And as you get older, and men, it's not as important, especially when you start thinking about the cost involved. But you want to look for the USDA organic symbol, and that is universal. They have to meet some strict criteria for that from the U.S. government, and that's for everything involved, including fruits, vegetables, meats. So look for that if you're looking for organic products, and it just means that you're going to be safer and healthier in the long run.
Well, some good advice, and so we've covered all the major food groups now. Before we go, we want to let you know that Dr. Stanton has several ways you can hear from him and get medical information beyond our monthly segments here.
We have the daily facts of the day, medical information. That's just cool little tidbit information that's available on Facebook, on our Everyday Medicine, and on my page. And then we have 2 podcasts that are available: an Everyday Medicine, which is some consumer-based information on some common health topics like we talk about here, and then a more physician or practitioner-based one that we just released in conjunction with EM News, a magazine for physicians that's out there. So you can check those out on Facebook, Twitter, and on iTunes.
All right, under Everyday Medicine with Dr. Ryan Stanton. Thanks for being back with us.
Thank you.
We'll be back with more news and weather after this.